Just one thing
Sharp.
that I would like to say. Just one thing
Going down.
that I would like to say.
This is the Black Information Network Daily Podcast, and I am your host, Ramses Ja. And sometimes the amount of stories that make their way to us means that we simply can't cover everything that comes our way. But from time to time, a story just stays with me, and I feel compelled to share it with you and give you my thoughts. And now, one more thing. Okay, for these, I normally would have a news clip for you to check out, but this time I'm actually going to be sharing from Black Enterprise, an article entitled Florida Textbook Removes Reference of Rosa Parks' Race to Adhere to Stop Woke Act. It's written by Sherelle Burt. And this one is kind of a sign of the times. But more importantly, I think it's a display of a tactic, brilliant tactic, and something we need to know about because clearly it's an effective tactic. For those of us who understand the value of education, of raising our youth the right way, of ensuring the viability of our posterity, and appreciating our history and why we should know it, we're paying particular attention to the goings-on in Florida. And it also makes sense for us to identify the different strategies that are being employed. Now, I'm going to take you on a thought experiment. Imagine you're going to a movie theater, okay? You walk up to the ticket window, and there's a young girl working the ticket window. You ask for a ticket, give her the money, she gives you the ticket, she says, enjoy the show, right? And then you walk into the movie theater and you ask the usher, hey, which way is the movie theater? And the usher says, oh, it's right this way, sir. And before you stop, you want to get some concessions. So you go to the concession stand. And then there's another kid working behind the concession stand. Oh, I'd like a popcorn and a soda, please. You get the money, they give you the popcorn and the soda, and then you're off to the movie, right? So in that thought experiment, I want you to ask yourself, how many of the people that you interacted with were white? More important question is, how many were black? Was anyone Hispanic, Native, Asian? Maybe you didn't even think about it. But if you were to think about it, when there's nothing to think about, for most people, the default is white. And that's important because I'm going to explain a tactic that I'm seeing. Now, those of us who, again, pay attention to our history, we recognize that history is often whitewashed. Okay. This is the version of history that says that Martin Luther King was the be all and end all, and everyone loved him universally when he was alive, and that he was celebrated, and he perhaps died of natural causes. Who knows? You know, people tend to overlook the assassination part of his life. But those in the know understand that Dr. King had a 20% approval rating from both whites and blacks while he was alive. Right? That's the truth of the matter. And that, of course, has been whitewashed. Dr. King has been deified by white folks on both sides of our political aisle here in this country to represent rather more, or rather something rather different from what he actually stood for. And his messaging has been co-opted and used by people who would never support Dr. King if he was alive. It would never be found anywhere near him. And indeed, Dr. King wouldn't have anything to do with them either. And this is whitewashing, right? We knew that Dr. King was standing up for workers. He was going after the money when he was assassinated. Obviously, he stood for, black people, brown people, marginalized people. But there was much more to him. And every year on Dr. King's holiday, there's a little sliver of his life that gets replayed over and over again. And that's whitewashing. Now, this new version of whitewashing looks like this very story in Black Enterprise. So again, Florida textbook removes reference of Rosa Parks's race to adhere to Stop Woke Act. So, in effect, in Florida, this article goes on to say that Rosa Parks's race had to be removed in order to be compliant for this textbook and to be used in the school. Now, obviously, the story only makes sense. It's only significant if Rosa Parks is a Black woman who firsthand felt like this was an opportunity to establish a narrative, to make a change, to protest, etc. And she was arrested, and how the story goes. But what if her race is removed from the equation? And what if you're a little kid, or maybe you're a big kid, and you don't know the first thing about Rosa Parks, and this is your first time learning anything about her? Remember that thought experiment of walking into the movie theater? The game that your mind plays? You walk up to the concession stand and you get the ticket from the concession, or you get the ticket counter, rather. You get the ticket from the girl behind the counter. How your brain doesn't automatically think that might be an Asian person. And you go to the usher, and the usher may not automatically be a Native American person. And you go to get your concession, and your brain may not automatically tell you that the person in the concession stand is Black. For most folks, I'd argue that all three of those characters would be white, because that's the default. So what do we get when we strip away Rosa Parks' race? We get the default. And because the default is white, then what we have is now, in effect, the literal whitewashing of Rosa Parks and her story. And of course, this is all under the guise of protecting children. It's centering white children's feelings about history. They like the part where white people were good to Black people, and there were some people who weren't good to Black people, but white people stood up. They don't like the part that Black people stood up for themselves. Black power is very scary. They do not want their children to know anything about it. Clearly, and we well know, certainly by now, that these folks don't want their children to know that white people purchased and owned and perpetuated slavery. And the children of those slaves were born free from the same creator and were enslaved solely because of the color of their skin. Property. Born, live a short, hard life, and die a slave. And it was white people doing that. 2 black people. A slave class based on race. Gone from textbooks. So, the reason we're talking about this is because these sorts of tactics are brilliant. As long as there's this veneer of, oh, it's because we're being patriotic. Oh, it's because we're protecting children. Oh, it's because of this reason or that reason or the other reason. They are literally whitewashing history in front of our very eyes. And because they're singing white folks' greatest hits, well, sure, we need to protect children. I know who Rosa Parks is. Children don't need their feelings hurt in school. Completely ignoring the fact that this history was taught since it was created, since it was established. And every other child that went through school managed to get out just fine. This attack is different. This attack has people listening and thinking critically. And because they're thinking about kids, it plays with their emotions. And the strategy behind it is brilliant and effective and very, very dangerous for us. Now, I want to know what you think. Maybe you know something I don't. So, as always, you can use the red microphone talkback feature on the iHeartRadio app. Share your thoughts with me. And of course, you can hit me up on all social media. I am at Ramses Ja. Let's talk about it, all right? And until we do, peace. This has been a production of the Black Information Network. Today's show is produced by Chris Thompson. Have some thoughts you'd like to share? Use the red microphone talkback feature on the iHeartRadio app. While you're there, be sure to hit subscribe and download all of our episodes. I am your host, Ramses Ja, on all social media. Join us tomorrow as we share our news with our voice, from our perspective, right here on the Black Information Network Daily Podcast.